Hello everybody, welcome to Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video. Trying to hit 150k subs. That subscription would be much appreciated. Also, if you're on your phone, go ahead and hype the video, as that is the best way to push this video out into the algorithm. Yeah, we're back with hot takes. You guys get it. Let's go right into it. From Phoenix Blue, Wemby isn't winning a single DPOY. Obviously, he is always going to be the favorite, but because he is so damn tall, he will never play over the 65 game threshold to be considered, and sadly, his career will probably be kind of over before 30 because he is just too tall. Players that tall don't stay healthy and have long-term careers. Well, that is historically the case. What I will say about Wemby is he does seem to have at least an understanding of the many health risks that come with his size. He is worked specifically on like flexibility and things like that, like just like flexibility in his ankles and his feet, trying to be smart about when he jumps, how he lands. So I would say that that is kind of the best case scenario with that, but the odds that he plays over 65 games multiple times does feel a little bit low. There's a chance that that 65 game threshold will be changed at some point in his career. That is definitely part of the equation that might not always be a part of it. But yeah, there is definitely a lot of issues with Wemby's health that are hopefully not going to be issues throughout his career, but he missed half of his second season and he's already missed a decent chunk of this one. I like to be optimistic. I do think he will at least have 1 or 2 years where he gets that amount of games played at a bare minimum, so he probably still will win it at least at one point. I'm feeling less likely that he's just going to win like 5 of them in succession, because the odds that he has that many healthy seasons in a row just feels kind of low. From Jokic Glazer, when J-Dub comes back, he'll make the Thunder worse. Last season without J-Dub, they were 13-0, and now they're 16-1. That's a combined 29-1, which would be on pace for 79 wins. In addition, he has a negative 12.6 on-off net rating. They literally had a better net rating last year without both Shea and J-Dub than both of them because of how much worse J-Dub makes them. By the way, they were a plus 23 net rating with Shea and without J-Dub. Shea averaged 40 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists on 67% true shooting with only 3 turnovers per 75 possessions last year when J-Dub wasn't on the floor. The most overrated player in the NBA. Wow, a Jokic fan placing too much stock in advanced stats? How could that possibly be? But first, I want to talk about our sponsor, Factor. I have always needed to be fast and flexible for my schedule, and in the past that would mean sacrificing delicious, affordable food for the quickest possible option. But Factor changed that with fresh, never frozen meals delivered right to my door. And then all it takes is just 2 minutes in the microwave and my meal is ready. Not only is Factor convenient, but it also takes the guesswork out of eating smart for everyone. Eating clean and portion control have never been so easy, with meals that are 350 to 550 calories per serving, and Factor just introduced its healthiest menu yet, doubling the size to 80 plus rotating weekly meals, with double the seafood and protein options, and even more Mediterranean meals than ever. So head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code ALSORUSTYFB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code ALSORUSTYFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. Thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring this video. I think it is pretty ridiculous to get upset at a player for not having a positive net rating on one of the most stacked and deep teams of all time. Do I think Shea probably plays a little bit better without J-Dub? Sure, but also him averaging 40 points and 7 assists is not sustainable. That is far too much production. That is far too much usage. And if you know me, I'm a big proponent that too much usage is just not a good thing, and that would be exactly that. To be very straightforward here, sometimes the eye test prevails, and with J-Dub, it is rather clear that he is an exceptional defender, he's a really good playmaker, a solid ball handler, and a solid scorer. Has he had rough edges at his offensive game that have sometimes been troublesome? Absolutely, but the notion that he's bad or that he makes this team worse is absolutely ridiculous, especially in a playoff context, because you really just, the Thunder's defense is so good that sure, Maybe Shea just entirely carrying the load on the offensive end would still ultimately work, but that's a very bad thing to bet on. That's a very bad thing to place all your cards, all your chips in. Like, I think this take is ridiculous. I understand where you're coming from with the on-off difference. I understand that they've technically won a lot of games without him, but that's just a testament to how damn talented and deep this roster is, not that J-Dub is secretly a bad player. I think that's ridiculous. Also, only 3 turnovers. Shea is one of the best players at not turning the ball ever in the league. 3 turnovers per 75 possessions is probably higher than what he actually typically does. From either Eleanor or Eleanor, Shea is going to go down as the greatest scorer of his generation. When it comes to his scoring rate and efficiency, he outclasses Luka. He's a more well-rounded scorer than Giannis. He just simply scores more than Jokic. With time, people will forgive him for the foul baiting and recognize that, hey, maybe 2 of his 10 free throws a night are suspect, but the rest come from great craft and getting people off of their feet. We've forgiven Wade and Kobe for the same, or just from being a prolific driver. Well, unfortunately, I think James Harden kind of brought the concept of foul baiting to the forefront of people's minds in a way that it was kind of just not really harped on too much in the past. Also, I just think that there's more of a media environment to put focus on that there was not previously. Like, there's a very big negativity bias with sports media in general, and given how much more outlets there are, whether it be professional, whether it be from people who are just doing it at home or doing it because they found an audience like I am, like one way or the other, there's just enough people pushing out that foul grifting narrative that I don't think that's comparable to people forgiving Kobe and Wade for it. I think people just outright didn't pay that much attention to that aspect of their game. It's definitely been left out of the conversation as time has gone on. Also, though, I am one to make the take that I don't think that he actually grifts that many of his free throws. I'd probably say it's more than 2 out of every 10. It's probably like 3 or 4. Like, I would say out of all the times that he gets fouled, probably 2 out of every 10 times he's definitely baiting. And obviously free throw attempts, 2 fouls, it's 2 per the foul unless they get the you get what I'm saying. As for him being the best scorer of his generation, well, the only real competition is Giannis, Jokic, and Luka. He does outclass Luka in efficiency. He has one of the most insane scoring rates we've ever seen. This year, he's averaging like 1 point per minute. Another player who I think should be in this conversation, at least for the regular season, should be Joel Embiid, but you gotta factor playoffs into all of this, and while it's mostly health that is the reason Joel Embiid has not been the crazy dominant scorer in the playoffs that he is in the regular season, probably discounts him from this conversation. Giannis, I think for Giannis, it just comes down to the limitations in his game. Like you say, he's a more well-rounded scorer than Giannis. I do think that well-rounded scoring and like versatility, scoring bag and all of that, I do think it's overrated, because ultimately what matters is how many points you generate and the efficiency in which you do it. But when we're, essentially, what's the term? Splitting hairs. When we're splitting hairs here with who the better scorer is, yeah, I'll give it to Shea just because he's one of the greatest mid-range shooters of all time. He's a very, very good 3-point shooter, at least far better than Giannis is. So I'm fine with saying he's over Giannis. As for Jokic, your logic here is that Jokic just simply does not score as much, and I do think that is fair, but ultimately, like, scorer versus offensive player is a different conversation. I think it's fair to say that Shea is ultimately going to be known as the better scorer, but truly when it just comes to, hey, give this player the ball, he's going to go try and get a bucket, I still would take Jokic over Shea in that personally. Jokic is just more of a playmaker. Jokic just is not as aggressive as a scorer, but I don't think that makes him a worse one. Like, what is Jokic putting up this year? Like fucking 27 on 75% true shooting, something like that. Let me look up the specifics. No, he's still at 29 this year. He's had a couple of lower scoring games, so I thought maybe his numbers went down. But no, Jokic is averaging 29.6 points this year so far, and he has a 73% true shooting percentage. That's only 4 more points or 3 less points than what Shea is averaging, only playing about 1.5 more minutes. So I don't know. I still think Jokic is a better scorer than Shea, but Shea's a way better defensive player. Not as good as Jokic though, but like, I don't know. I think very plausible that, just like you say, from the notion of just he does score more than Jokic, he is more known as a scorer than Jokic, that he will get the title. But just for who I actually think is straight up the best scorer in the NBA, I'm still going Nikola Jokic, which is wild given that he's mostly known for his playmaking, but he averaged 29 last year. He's averaging 29 this year. He does it on bonkers efficiency. I still think he's the best scorer in the league. All right, this next take from Burnt Penguin is in response to the Luka take from last episode, which if you missed that, you should go watch it. But someone is essentially arguing that Luka needed to be traded so that he got in shape. My reply to that was, Luka has gotten out of shape and then gotten back in shape before. Here's Burnt Penguin's take. I will say, Rusty, as a registered dietitian and personal trainer, there is absolutely no excuse for someone with the resources Luka has at his disposal to stay in shape. I assume you meant to not stay in shape, to ever be overweight, regardless of any injuries. There were clearly some level of discipline issues with Luka if he couldn't stay at a healthy weight with every resource imaginable available to him to make dieting easy, personal chefs, dietitians, anything you could ever want. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's a reason that athletes are in the best shape. It's because they also have all the resources in the world and they're paid millions of dollars to do exactly that. My take was not that Luka had no amount of discipline issues. I think the hookah Luka stuff was pretty clear evidence of that. Like, he's definitely not been in the most ideal shape in ways that he definitely could change. I'm not trying to suggest that just if you're injured, it's impossible to keep weight off. It makes it substantially different, like the types of exercises you can do. Like, it's not as simple as like, oh, you have a foot injury, well, work your arms. It's like, it's a little bit different when it comes to basketball for a variety of reasons. But yeah, Luka, not as disciplined as he should have been, 100%. However, neither was Shaquille O'Neal. Neither was James Harden some of the time. But you know what? The talent prevailed. And as long as the issue was not at a point where it was completely out of hand, which I believe there is no evidence to suggest that is the case, then it is still entirely invalid to trade the guy for that reason. Like, even still, if Luka was 300 pounds, if I was the Mavericks, I would still be like, okay, we need to get him in the gym and give him some kind of regimen before I'm trading him away. The fact of the matter is, Nico Harrison was already of this mindset that he should trade Luka, and then he found the first opportunity that he had to do exactly that, and it was a pattern that existed with Luka before. So my ultimate point is that Luka was going to be back to being Luka regardless of the trade. Who Luka was before a little bit underwhelming to what his potential was? Was he underselling his capabilities because of those things? Absolutely. Was he still one of the 5 best players in the NBA regardless of all of that? Also, absolutely. From Peter Hill, the reason Shaq and Barkley are so bitter about the modern game is that they both know they could have been better. Imagine if they'd concentrated on their games and their conditioning. I don't know that I would lump Barkley into this, and the thing is, there are plenty of former NBA players who are bitter, who, you know, still reached their ceiling, still ultimately accomplished what they set out to accomplish. Shaq, of course, was an all-time great player who also underperformed what his ultimate potential was, because there was no reason that Shaq could not have been the greatest player of all time, other than that Shaq just did not try nearly as hard as he could. He coasted on his talent, his size that he was just given naturally. I wouldn't lump Charles Barkley into the same thing as Shaq, because Barkley didn't really struggle with weight in his career. Like, that was actually something that was more of a problem pre-NBA career, but like, you can't really say that Chuck was ever like severely out of shape at any point in his NBA career, other than maybe like when he was in Houston, which is at the very tail end of things anyways. Like, when you go and look at him in Philadelphia, him in Phoenix, he's in great shape. Like, I think the round mound of rebound stuff was mostly college related. Also, there was some story about him pre-draft where his weight was a little high going in, and he worked it off, but then found out that Philly could only offer him a 1 year, like $500,000 contract or some shit, something even less so than that. And then he went on an eating spree to get the weight back up, and then they drafted him anyways. And then they were like, if you dominate in the summer league, then we'll trade some players to give you a better contract. So there's been stuff with Barkley, but not to anywhere near the extent of Shaq. Also, like, I don't really think that there were that many weaknesses in Charles' game. Obviously, he could have been a better defensive player. Probably should not have shot threes as much as he did for how bad he was at them. But I don't know. I don't think Chuck is somebody who like dramatically underperformed their potential. He's one of the greatest players of all time. He's one of the greatest power forwards of all time. He won an MVP, and the only reason he didn't win a ring was a matter of circumstances. Like the 93 Suns were a fucking unbelievably good team. They just ran into the Chicago Bulls. So I wouldn't lump Barkley into that. And also, a big part of the resentment is money. And especially when you listen to Shaq. Shaq will bring up a player's contract before anything else when it comes to talking about the modern game, especially like Rudy Gobert and Ben Simmons, just players that he likes to hate on and be like, really, that guy makes 40 million? And it's just stupid because that's how just time works. The league got more profitable. You were in a time where the league was less profitable. That's not any of those players' faults. It's not your fault. That's just how time works, Shaq. And you're being bitter about how time works. It's fucking stupid and annoying. And yeah, I don't think that Barkley is that bitter about the modern game. I think he's just ignorant to it. And I don't know. It's not anything new. Like, Wilt Chamberlain was a huge hater of Michael Jordan when Michael Jordan was popping off in the 90s. Like, that's just kind of the way it goes. Your generation is worse than mine. It's a tale as old as time. Old man yells at cloud shit. It's just the way that it always gets. And it's really pathetic. And I would like more people to recognize how pathetic it is and stop doing it. And frankly, in a way, I appreciate Shaq and Barkley for how pathetic that is, because it's going to make it a very core focus of mine as I get older and older to try my best to not be the old man yells at clouds thing. It is already starting to happen though a little bit. What the fuck is this 6'7" meme? I'm too old. But yeah, 100%. We were laughing at 21. It's still the same shit. Yeah. From Louis Vincent Abrea. NBA fans are hypocritical. They love to praise players like Derrick Rose and Tracy McGrady, often having their own headcanons. If they weren't injured, XYZ happens. But absolutely flame Kawhi Leonard and Anthony Davis, particularly Kawhi. Even though Kawhi has proven that he can lead teams to championships despite being injury prone, while D Rose and T-Mac can't stay healthy enough to bring a championship. I love Derrick Rose, but all I'm saying is you can't praise one and flame the other for the same reason, especially when the one you're flaming is someone who accomplished more than the ones you're praising. Yeah, it's almost like there's a anger at those players for sticking around in spite of the injuries. Like Kawhi and AD are gonna play half of the games but still make $40-50 million annually to do it. I can understand that frustration. The other thing is, like, it's that these players are playing right now and those players are not. This is yet another thing that it's like, yeah, it's a matter of how generations work. When a player is retired and they're a couple of years removed from really playing, you start to only focus on the positive stuff with them. Where with Kawhi and Anthony Davis, they're as in the mud in terms of their injury stuff as they've really ever been before. It's at the forefront of the conversation with them more than it has ever been before. But I guarantee you, when Kawhi and Anthony Davis retire, more of the conversations around them are going to be focused on how good they were at their absolute best. That's just not what we are in right now in the present day. Like, I'm sure there are a good amount of people who are annoyed with Derrick Rose to some extent about all that, especially like, hell, when I was 15 years old, dude, I was like kind of, because Derrick Rose is the starting point guard of that team. And frankly, with how goddamn inefficient he was, he really shouldn't have been. He ruined the spacing. He shot like 40% from the field, but I was still like, it's kind of cool that Derrick Rose is playing again. I don't know. Yeah, like I said, it's a matter of the time. It's a matter of when time passes, we will say more positive things about those players. But I get exactly what you're coming from. Like, injury prone player gets X, Y, and Z is what would have happened. Injury prone player literally achieved that, but didn't achieve more. and now we're hating on them for it. I get this is a correct take, 100%. I do think it is heavily tied in to just that this is happening in the present day and that happened in the past. From Mr. VXG, there was too much physicality pre-2000s for skinny Wemby to have the same effect. He is perfect for this era, though. My guy. I mean, I guess you said pre-2000. Like the early 2000s were not one of the most physical eras. Have you heard of Kevin Garnett? Have you heard of Kevin Garnett? Like literally, Kevin Garnett is as skinny as Wemby was while being much shorter. And he was still, I mean, he was still putting up fucking like superstar numbers by like 1999. I don't know how specific we want to get about the cutoff here, but yeah. Kevin Garnett was a 3-time All-Star, would have been 4 if he didn't get injured in the third year in the middle of that, putting up 20 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 3.5 stocks. And in his 1990-2000 season, he put up 23 points per game and was second in MVP voting with an all-NBA first-team selection and all-defensive first-team selection. So no, I hate that. I hate when people say that shit. There are plenty of players who have been skinny and still very effective in their time. Fucking Ralph Sampson was a goddamn twig. And yeah, he had a bunch of injury issues, but when he was actually playing, he was a dominant, excellent player while being a twig. So I'm not with that at all. That's ridiculous. Too much physicality for Wemby at 7'7", but not too much physicality for Muggsy Bogues, who is 2 feet and 4 inches shorter. Ridiculous. From Rick Harrison, honestly, the way people talk about help pisses me off so much. When people say a player had no help, they are almost always talking about offenses. Jason Kidd in the early 2000s, Dirk in 2011, Allen Iverson in 2001, Steph in 2022, etc. all had great defenses surrounding them. Yet, just because those teams have one player who kept their offense above water, an impressive feat no doubt, the media and fans only see their highlights and statistics and attribute the team's success entirely to that one player. I mean, there's more examples than the ones you cited. I would say Derrick Rose in 2011 is a very similar case. Russell Westbrook in 2017 is a very similar case. Those are some stacked defenses. In fact, the 2011 Chicago Bulls are one of the greatest defenses of all time. I don't think many people recognize that, but like statistically speaking, at the very least, they were like, holy shit good on the defensive end of the floor. And then Derrick Rose did everything on the offensive end. And yeah, I mean, you kind of said this better than I could. This is a very succinct comment, well put. Yeah, this just offense. And I get it. Like, I 100% understand something that, specifically to hearken this to Russell Westbrook's MVP race, like I remember the discussion at the time being like, okay, if you don't want to factor in the triple-double average, if you don't want to factor in that Russ is averaging 2 more points and like 1.5 more rebounds than James Harden, well, you do have to factor in that James Harden's team is so much better. And the reason that people believed that is because James Harden's team was better offensively, but they were a worse defensive team. So I don't know how you square that. Like, it's really just that, like, oh, other people can score a little bit. He has 6th man of the year Eric Gordon on his team. He has Ryan Anderson, who can space the floor and is almost entirely an offensive-minded player. Like, it's just overly simplistic, and yeah, it is very much centered on the offensive end of the floor whenever we talk about a player carrying. I think something that is a more accurate place to say something like that is like 2003 with Tim Duncan or 2012 with LeBron James. Like, those guys were probably, in the case of Duncan, definitely the best defender on their goddamn team. Who would be a better defender than LeBron on the 2018 Cavs? Like, who actually plays? Like, those were mostly offensive players too, just not particularly good ones, like Kevin Love and Jordan Clarkson and Rodney Hood. I'm trying to think now because I feel like there's someone obvious that I am missing. Because 2018 LeBron was not playing defense at his absolute best, no doubt. Like J.R. Smith, George Hill, I guess, was Jay Crowder there by the time the playoffs were around? I don't think so. Yeah, his best defensive player on that team was probably either Tristan Thompson or Larry Nance Jr. Or if you want, what's the other example that I just said? 2003 Tim Duncan. He had Bruce Bowen on the team. He had what was left of David Robinson, nowhere near his peak, but still a pretty good rim protector. But otherwise, he was probably the only, like, him and Bruce Bowen were the only great defenders on that team, and he was still far better than Bruce Bowen. So, like, in a case, especially where it's a two-way player who is carrying, that is more apt. But like, especially when it's like Steph or Allen Iverson or Dirk, guys who are not known for the defensive end of the floor, and that entire end is dictated by other players who are overall creating an elite defense. Yeah, to factor out the other side of the floor entirely is ridiculous and revisionist, very narrow-minded. From Otis, aka Nobody, OKC needs to have some of their picks taken away. Give Sam Presti all of his flowers, but it's simply not good for the league for one team to have such a massive amount of valuable assets. Give them some financial compensation or something, but letting a team already this good get potentially multiple lottery picks for the next 2 drafts on top of it already being terrible for the health of the NBA. Let them keep the second round picks if you want, but keep them out of the lottery for the good of all 29 other teams. I mean, that's just... I get that this is probably coming from an emotional place, but like, that is the definition of a slippery slope. There are multiple instances throughout league history where you could highlight that like something like this was unfair. But the fact of the matter is, you can only legislate something like this after the fact. Like, if you wanted to say we should put a cap on how many draft picks can be included in a trade in order to stop something like this from happening, then sure, I guess I could hear you out on that. But you can't retroactively take picks back. Like the Stephian rule, which is you cannot trade a back-to-back draft picks from like, so if you have a 2015 pick, you can't, if you're trading a 2015 pick, you can't trade a 2016. But you can trade a 2017 one. That rule exists because I think his name is Phil Stephian, GM of the Cleveland Cavaliers, just traded so many first round picks that became really good players for no goddamn reason and just completely cooked the Cleveland Cavaliers for like a very long time. I believe this happened in the 80s. That rule was created, but you can't be like, okay, Chris Mullin, you're going to the Cavs, buddy. Like, that's not how it works. And Chris Mullin's the only player I can think of at the top of my head who was involved in that one of those trades, but there's a lot. Yeah, you can't do that. You just simply can't. Something similar happened back in 2016 when Kevin Durant went to the Warriors. In that case, there's literally nothing that can be done. Like, I actually my first video that ever like really popped off, like got 200,000 views way back in the day. I made a video on when DeMarcus Cousins signed with the Warriors. And I was like, the league needs to add a rule where you can't sign multiple All-Stars or whatever the fuck. But I also don't even really think that's the case. I think it is on the rest of the league to not fuck up to the degree in which they did. And like, yeah, for the GMs that were entirely uninvolved in those trades, it sucks to get caught in the crossfire. But I think that's just kind of the way that it is. Yeah, you can't just take back picks. It just does not work in any capacity. It's not fair. It's not right. It would cause riots. No. It just doesn't. There's just no way that works in any capacity. I understand where you're coming from, but no. All right, this will be the last take of the video from Brian Duru. Chris Paul is the 3rd greatest mid-range shooter in the last 25 years and the 5th greatest mid-range shooter of all time. Only KD and Dirk are better than him from the last 25 years, and only those two plus Jordan and Bird are better than him all time. And when you consider all of those guys have at least 6 inches on him, that's remarkable. I hesitate saying that Larry Bird is in the top 5 greatest mid-range shooters of all time. Not that he doesn't have a case, but just that there's literally not numbers. Like, it's entirely vibes based. I know there's probably someone out there who did some tracking on like a limited game sample size, but they did not start tracking like mid-range percentages until the late 90s. Michael Jordan, to be fair, has something similar, but Jordan was so goddamn prolific in the mid-range, and he did have those numbers at the latter half of his career, and they were still very, very good. I've seen tracking on some of his numbers pre that as well that were exceptional. I can also tell you from the eye test, especially watching the 1993 finals, that shit was automatic in that series. But sure, if you want to throw Bird there, I would probably go with Kobe or Kawhi Leonard before I went with Larry Bird. Kawhi definitely has a case. It's just more of a matter of longevity because Kawhi is goddamn automatic for mid-range himself. But otherwise, I would agree with that list. I will throw one more name in there. Shea also will probably be towards the top of that conversation. Like I've said that the mid-range Mount Rushmore, when it's all said and done for Shea, will probably be KD, Dirk, MJ, and Shea. Chris Paul for me is the fourth guy on that mid-range Mount Rushmore right now, but I do think Shea will eventually eclipse him. But as you highlight here, him doing that while being a 6-foot player is remarkable. The guy is shooting over trees and he just hits it every single time. He really fades back on his mid-range pull-ups a lot more so than those other guys do. Like Jordan especially, like when he elevates, he will just shoot straight up because he's jumping high enough that unless you jumped with him, you're probably not going to contest all that well. And like Kevin Durant and Dirk are literally 7 feet tall, so by default their release point is just so high up. But Chris like has to go to the extra effort for creating the separation because he can't just simply shoot over you without there being a little bit of a dribble move or a jab step or something that gets you to lay off a little bit, because otherwise that shit's going to get blocked. I mean, to be fair, he is going up against guards more often than not, so it's not like he's always shooting over giants, but he is shooting over giants a lot. And like he's particularly very good when he has a big man on an island. Part of that is the big man's natural inclination is to defend the rim, so when he starts driving, they're just going to run straight to the basket. But like one way or the other, though Chris Paul's not the greatest mid-range shooter ever, he is one of the most impressive, maybe probably I would even say the most impressive mid-range shooter in the history of this game. But yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching Hot Takes, and goodbye.